Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer. Welcome to part 1 of my discussion on Blade Runner 2049. The film opens with a preface that outlines the basis for this narrative, unlike the content that I previously reviewed. The outline begins with defining replicants, which are artificially manufactured humans. Not quite the same as Data, as he was an android. The definition of bioengineered is somewhat confusing, but I will set the usage aside. Used as slave labor off the Earth. This eventually led to their rebellion against the humans who created them. Subsequently, their manufacture was prohibited as a result of their rebellion. This feels very familiar, as if Alex Kurtzman decided to use this idea in his Star Trek fan fiction. But enough about that. All remaining old model replicants are hunted down and retired by Blade Runners. The scene begins with what appear to be solar energy farms, as far as can be seen, until a flying vehicle navigates the landscape. The occupant, identified as KD6-3.7 by his police credentials, awaits the arrival at his destination. A man is shown on the ground wearing a biohazard suit of some sort while attending to what he later refers to as a protein farm. The vehicle lands near the same location, and K, as I will call him for the purpose of this review, exits the vessel to approach and enter the dwelling that the man lives in. A sentry drone detaches itself from the vessel and monitors the location. Once he enters and notices that no one is present within, Kay approaches a boiling pot in the kitchen and decides to wait for the man to enter. It is important for me to note that not a single word of dialogue is spoken during this opening. Visuals are used to tell the story, as opposed to spoken exposition, and I find this encouraging. After cleaning off the biohazard suit, the man takes it off and looks over the vessel, as if he knows what's coming next. He then enters the dwelling to wash his hands, and Kay speaks to him about taking care not to drag any dirt inside. He then asks if he is Sapper Morton, to which the man calls himself a farmer. He reveals that he is cooking garlic, and asks Kay if he wants any. Kay declines, and questions him about his history, until expressing preference of bringing him into the station rather than the alternative, as he sets his gun on the table. He then takes an identification device out of his pocket and instructs Morton to look up and to the left. Morton then begins to fight him, and he appears far more formidable than Kay. After being thrown through the wall and wrestled to the floor, Kay manages to gain the upper hand and punches Morton in the throat, temporarily disabling him. Morton stabs him in the arm, which Kay has no reaction to, informing me that he is likely a machine. He then uses the identification device to scan a serial number under his eyeball and confirm his identity. Kay then collects his gun from the table, and Morton asks how it feels to kill one of his own kind. As he is a replicant, Kay appears to be in conflict about having to do this. He is still prepared to execute his required duties, and Morton speaks of having seen a miracle. Kay is confused by this statement, and Morton attempts to use this to his advantage. He lunges toward him, but is shot down by Kay. He then extracts the eye and washes it off before returning to his vehicle. He contacts his superior, who shows little sympathy for his sustained injuries. He places the eye onto the scanner on board, thus confirming the retirement of Sapper Morton. While glancing outside, he spots something by the tree near him. He goes to take a closer look and sees a plant on the ground. which causes him to suspect that it is a marker. He assigns the drone to scan beneath the ground, and a crate is detected several meters below the surface. His superior instructs him to return home for his baseline. His return to Los Angeles presents a densely populated industrial machine that is so engulfed with pollution that the buildings can hardly be seen. He flies to the structure that houses the Los Angeles Police Department and lands inside. While passing his fellow officers, they chastise him and refer to him as a skin job, so he ducks out of the way as if it is a common occurrence. Just a moment. Just a moment. Skin job was a term used by the LAPD as slang when referring to replicants. These individuals are clearly human, so why are they persecuted? Kay goes to a room for his baseline test, which seems to be a means of detecting emotional responses in replicants. Kay passes the test, and he is informed that he can pick up his bonus. This implies a reward for remaining a conformist, which concerns me greatly. He walks to his apartment, indicating that the vehicle he was using did not belong to him. While approaching his residence, onto which advertisements are constantly being projected, what appears to be snow is falling onto the ground. This snow looks more like soot, and I suspect that it has something to do with the constantly blacked-out sky. While exploring this narrative, I am constantly reminded of the J.L. show and the dystopian future that it presented. Now I can see what the writers were going for, but here it makes sense. This is not a Star Trek future, but rather one where conflict thrives by nature of the narrative. While approaching his apartment, Kay receives the same chastisement from the local residents that he was given at the police station. Once he enters his very cramped living quarters, he activates a device on the wall and music begins playing. A female voice welcomes him home, but remains unseen to the viewer. This appears to be a voice simulation, which engages in more than rudimentary discussion. He attends to his sustained wounds, then showers and prepares himself a meal. While the food is being prepared, he asks if she wants a drink, and the voice says yes. He sets the food on a table and pours 2 drinks before consuming both of them. He sits down and waits, as the voice speaks of his dinner being ready. A device on the ceiling rotates toward the kitchen and projects the holographic representation of the female voice as she brings the food to him. She sets the virtual food on the table over his food, while appearing in the typical attire of a homemaker. She kisses him and ignites the cigarette that he puts into his mouth. With each of his responses, she adapts to his every need, as the projector on the ceiling continues to follow her around the room. He tells her that he brought home a present, and she responds with excitement. This simulation is programmed with remarkable accuracy to resemble a human being in appearance as well as in behavior. Kay has obviously developed a fondness for this simulation, and since he cannot find solace with any other beings, he takes great comfort in her presence. The present is an emanator, which allows the simulation to be rendered portable. He synchronizes the emanator with the device on the wall, and the projector deactivates. She now walks freely around the room and thanks him for this freedom. He asks where she wants to go, and they both walk out onto a balcony in the rain. The simulation experiences slight distortions from the rainfall, but adapts to them. She then walks toward him and takes his hand, even though they cannot touch each other. He guides his hand onto her face, and she tells him how happy she is to be with him. He becomes uneasy and tells her that she doesn't have to say such things. He would prefer that they both treat each other like equals, and this scene alone is far more character development than what the entirety of the JL show had to offer. They get closer to each other, and the simulation is suddenly paused. A voice message from Lieutenant Joshi, Kay's superior, informs him that the crate has been retrieved and for him to report immediately to the station. He deactivates the simulation and makes his way back to the police station. The contents of the crate are revealed to be human skeletal remains that had been buried for 30 years, according to the soil samples taken from the location. Through an advanced microscope, the medical examiner determines that the remains are of a woman who died in childbirth. Kay uses the microscope to take a closer look and discovers that she was in fact a replicant. Joshi declares this to be impossible and is greatly concerned about this revealed truth. She tasks Kay with ensuring that no evidence of this situation be left behind for the sake of keeping order. She even tells him to retire the offspring if necessary, and he is apprehensive of the idea of retiring a being that had been born. He believes that to be born is to have a soul, and she asks if he is questioning her orders. He tells her that he will comply, and before he leaves, she tells him that he has done well without a soul himself. Kay goes to the Wallace Corporation, which is the current manufacturer of replicants, to track down any records that pertain to the expired replicant. He meets with an associate who helps him to track down the pre-blackout records, and he explains that all non-physical information was lost during this time. Simultaneously, another replicant is taking an order for units to be delivered to a customer who is alerted about this search. She then goes to intercept them and introduces herself as Love. Kay is surprised to meet a named replicant, as he does not have a name himself. She guides him to the archives, where the records are housed. The door mechanism sticks when it opens, and she displays remarkable strength in opening it the rest of the way, showcasing herself as a potentially formidable opponent to Kay. She retrieves the audio file, and it is presented as an interview of some sort between the female and a man named Deckard. Just a moment. Just a moment. Officer Rick Deckard was a Blade Runner in Los Angeles in 2019, before the blackout occurred. He retired several replicants who had attempted to gain access to Dr. Eldon Tyrell. However, one of the replicants named Roy managed to kill Tyrell before he was retired. There is great depth to the narrative, and I am enriched by discovering this. There are hardly any negatives for me to identify, but I will continue to look for them.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attacks.
Q, this isn't the time. I am engaged right now, and I would appreciate no interruptions from Roy. No disrespect intended. You will have to wait your turn.
Not yet. Not.
Kay and Love share their observations from the audio file, and are both curious to know more. Both have different reasons for their curiosities, as well as their objectives. This scene almost presents Love with the wonder of a child, and it is very interesting to see her presented in almost the same way as Data was during Star Trek. Just to be clear, I am not referring to the JL show, but instead the Next Generation. Kay leaves the Wallace Corporation to meet with Deckard's former partner at a nursing home, for him not to know his whereabouts. During the discussion, the man makes an origami figure of a bull, informing Kay that Deckard is not a man to be trifled with. Love goes to meet Neander Wallace, the owner of the Wallace Corporation. I must take a moment to revel in the set design and vision of the filmmakers, because the production value witnessed here is extraordinary. The water reflection on all of the surfaces inside of the structure provide an almost ethereal appearance, and it is indeed quite illuminating. That's enough gloating. Love welcomes Wallace back and asks if he would like to review the newest replicant model before shipment. He tells her that no angel should enter the kingdom of heaven without a gift. What remarkable narcissism for a man who believes himself to be a god among men. He walks forward to reveal himself to be blind before going to review this new replicant. I don't as yet know how he can review anything without being able to see, but likely if he is as industrious as he appears, he has the means to overcome such a disability. The replicant is dropped out of a plastic womb onto the floor and is so born. She then takes her first breath, while naked like a child as it is born. Wallace examines the female and tells her happy birthday. He sits down and instructs Love to provide him with a device that grants him the ability to see. Flying cameras enter the room and surround the new model as Wallace controls them. He expresses regret in being unable to achieve what Tyrell could before his death, allowing replicants to procreate. He then kills the new model, but I am unsure as to why. If it was a matter of a witness to his discussion, the memories could simply be erased, couldn't they? No matter. He tasks Love with bringing the child to him, and she is prepared to comply with his demand, eager to impress him with her determination. Downtown, an older woman sends 3 younger associates after Kay, dressed as prostitutes, to find out what he knows about the situation, while he is eating in a dining area. He is looking over the photo of the dead tree, and one of them recognizes him as a Blade Runner. She and one of the others depart immediately, while the last observes any details that might give away his intentions. In the background, the world continues to spill into each frame, further establishing the world building utilized here. She turns away from him when Joy audibly initiates, realizing that he is only interested in his virtual companion. Kay decides to return to Morton's dwelling to search for any clues, and he spots one key on his piano slightly depressed. He touches it and realizes that something is sitting on the wire it is connected to inside of the piano. He reaches inside and withdraws a tin that contains a small sock and a photograph of a woman holding the child that he is seeking in front of the tree outside. How remarkably convenient for Morton to have left this clue for him. If Morton was the only person living here, why would he need to remind himself of this tin? If Kay hadn't spotted it, the plot would have likely stopped here. I have now found the first plot contrivance. It took 48 minutes of the narrative's runtime, so I am not overly concerned. Kay goes outside to look over the tree and notices unnatural carving at the base, slightly covered by the soil. He uncovers it to reveal the numbers 6, 10, 21, and a programmed memory of his is triggered. A brief glimpse of a child's hand holding a small wooden horse is shown in front of a furnace. He then sets Morton's dwelling on fire in order to destroy the evidence. Simultaneously, Love is collecting the evidence from the police station. She is interrupted by the medical examiner, who she promptly murders before completing her task. Joshi goes to Kay's apartment to inform him that the situation is now out of control. She demands answers, but he doesn't tell her everything. He is now personally invested, and this is beginning to compromise his objectivity. She asks him to tell her a memory, and he is concerned with providing intimate details about his past. He, however, tells her the memory that relates to the wooden horse. This is now the means to explain the context of that earlier revelation of his, from finding the numbers carved into the tree. He explains that he is the child who is being chased by other boys in an industrial facility of some type in their attempt to take the wooden horse. He takes the toy and hides it before they can find him, and when they do, he makes them think that he threw it into the fire. Joshi is amused by this story and tells him to stay on top of his mission. He goes to the DNA archives at the police station in search of any records that correspond with the numbers as a birth date. These numbers as a birth date are pre-blackout, so he can only check the records unfiltered for verification. He activates Joy, and she aids him in his search, also reminding him that he told her the same story several times. He also told her that the numbers he found were the ones inscribed under the base of the horse. He tells her not to refer to it in public anymore, knowing that if he is the child, he will be hunted by other Blade Runners. He finds 2 identical DNA records, one male and the other female. The female is listed as deceased, and their last location is identified as an orphanage, and so he and Joy make their way to find this place. This concludes part 1 of my review. If I may have missed any details, or you have suggestions, please submit them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.